All right, so seldom am I nervous to speak, but I have to give a confession. Not that rabbis confess, but I'm a bissel nervous because I'm not used to preaching to the converted. So we run. I'm used to preaching to the not yet converted. So you'll have to excuse me. I tell people, I didn't grow up religious. I grew up normal. So I'm from it's an easy crowd over here, I see. So I'm a little out of my comfort zone in Flatbush Borough Park, but so you'll have to bear with me and go with me. And my good brother Moshe Vigda, who I'd like to thank very much for everything he does for me, for my family, for Klal Israel. He's definitely one of the hidden tzaddikim. I think I may have outed you, but we thank you for everything you do. And Moshe Vigda told me I should be funny, but don't tell jokes. He said, be funny, but don't tell jokes. He said I should be hip, but don't talk about culture. So I don't know what, he put me in he said he needs to see the speech before. He wants to see it, and he's like the minister of propaganda. So I hope I don't get you in trouble, Moshe Vigda. I'll do my best to be kosher. And the topic tonight is happiness, joy. Why? What was the topic? Happiness is a serious problem, which was the title of a book that Moshe Vigda told me I can't talk about. So it's a tough. I'm on a tightrope over here. But I figured, my name is Simcha, so if a person's name is their essence, so I guess I may have some qualification. Talk about Simcha. We know that we've entered the month of Adar. We know it's a time to be happy, and I guess the first question that I had is, it's very hard to just suddenly be happy. It's Adar, you're going to be happy. How do you be happy? What if you lost your job and you're following the wrong team in the Super Bowl? Can I say Super Bowl? Is that, I'm allowed? So, Vince Lombardi, famous manager of the Green Bay Packers. Vince Lombardi, his players were once getting annihilated at halftime, and he said, either you're going to be fired with enthusiasm, or I'm going to make sure that you're fired with enthusiasm. So I think about it. So I hope I'm able to fire with enthusiasm, but it's not always easy to be fired up with enthusiasm. So I guess I'll preface the debate, the discussion. It's a dialogue, not a monologue. So feel free. Any questions, concerns, alternate speeches? I welcome all of the above, but it's not easy to just suddenly be happy. It's Adar, Purim, got to be happy. And especially when we look around the world, if anyone puts the radio on in the car, you'll see it's not such a happy world. There's a lot of sorrows, and there's what to mourn, and there's what to be sad about. So how do we just be happy? And what's the Jewish approach to joy? And what's the Jewish approach to Purim? So we'll build it up. I guess I'll start with the bio, so you know where I'm coming from. I'm from Manchester, England. So I'm an Englishman. You'll hear the accent. It's a little clandestine, but I'd like to welcome you to the class. I can start again if you want. Also, I would like to say, out of all there's a lot of chairs around. You don't need to be in the. So out of all the places I've ever. I don't want to be the camera either. So trust me, I get it. I get it. He tells me afterwards, you're on the camera. I'm on the sound system. I'm on the you can hear me from J2 across the street. You can hear me. So Kosher Delight, you can hear me. So a question that. Out of all the places I've ever spoken, I do want to say that the Baal Shem Tov Library, out of everywhere I've been, and I did at Crown Heights, I spoke to the 2,500 students at Crown Heights, that this is definitely, to be honest, it's the most recent of all places. That was a joke. But I tried to find a joke to begin that was kosher enough for Moshe Vigda. So I was looking around through my jokes, and I think there was I'm down to one joke, Moshe. I'm literally down to one, okay? And it's not even funny, but we'll try it. So knock knock.
Who is there?
Vashti.
Vashti who?
Wash the dishes so I can prepare dinner. It's a Purim. I'm trying to connect to the Chag. Okay, so I said before I didn't grow up religious. I did grow up. I grew up normal. I'm from Manchester, and there's a very famous American writer, Mark Twain. He once visited Manchester, and he wrote he'd like to spend the remaining days of his life in Manchester, and he concluded because he feels like it'll make the transition to death easier. So that's what Mark Twain said. That's funny. That's what Mark Twain said about my hometown. So it's a little grim up north. Hence today, I live in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, but it's fast becoming, I guess, Williamsburg because hipsters don't breed. So and biology trumps ideology. So it's becoming more Haredi, I think, by the hour. So, and I also, my background for me growing up, in fact, religion was like spiritual Valium. It was something that others needed. My background is in the film industry. I'm getting in trouble over here. After it was really a kind of it was an evolution, not a revolution. I think in college I was involved with different Jewish groups on campus, and after extended trips to Israel, I was schlepped into Chabad and schlepped into a wonderful yeshiva called Mayanot in Geula, which really it changed my life forever. I think about it and I miss it every day. Moshe knows the story. There's one particular story. My first interaction with Chabad. It's a story I've told. I've told the story so many times, I don't know which part is true and which part is hyperbole. So I guess it's infotainment. It's a mixture. It's information. It's entertainment. I don't know which is which. Izzy Gross, you're okay? You're good? I also want to welcome, we have a guest here tonight, Izzy Gross, dear friend of mine, wonderful supporter of our Chabad house. Makes the cholent, actually. Makes a great cholent. Don't take him over. He's very good cholent. So my first interaction with Chabad was the Bochrim who Friday they go around house to house, and I was really unfamiliar with Bochrim right. So I have my children now. I do the same thing, but at the time I get a knock at the door. I'm living in Manchester, not in the religious, more of the secular Jewish community. I say I was Jewish. Israel light. So I get a knock at the door, and there's two guys, and one guy is very. I know I have to be politically correct because I'm being live on YouTube. So he was very rotund. He was very big, and the other guy was very skinny. And they look like the number 10. If you can imagine these two guys, and they're literally they look like penguins. They're like black, white. And they're standing at my door, and they said, "Excuse me, you're Jewish?" And I said, "I guess, ish, Israelite, Jewish." They said, "We'd like to come in." And these two guys come in. They're like 15 years old, and they're carrying leather-bound briefcases. Look very official, very serious. Look like they, FBI agents. They come in, they put down their cases, and 770. Click, and they pull out the tefillin, phylactery. I never seen them. And I'm like, what's this? They said, we'd like to bind your arm and your head in straps of thick leather. I said, get out of my house and don't ever come back. So normally, no means no, but I think to these young yeshiva bachrim, they saw a challenge. They were excited. Ironically, my 15-year-old talks about the same thing every week now. So they saw me as a project. And I'm still a project. So every Friday they'd come, and I'd sort of remove them, and they'd come back. And I guess after several months, just to get rid of them, I'm like, do what you got to do. And I have to tell you, one guy's working the arm, one guy's on the head. They're working me over, hands in the hair, and I loved it. And I felt very connected, and it really it changed my life. And we used to. My whole week sort of really was structured around these guys. And after a while, 10 came with 11, who came with 12, and he came with a blowtorch. We still have marks he kind of burnt down half the kitchen, and we felt bad because we couldn't feed them. And then they would take me back to yeshiva, and they'd invite me in. And before I knew it, these two guys, they'd take it of my life. So I don't know what I guess the moral is: if Chabad at the door, don't answer, because you'll end up looking like me. I guess that's I'm a cautionary tale. Ironically, today I chair the Religious Affairs Committee at a quite well-known art school in the hipster haven of Brooklyn. It's called Pratt Institute. If you know the Pratt Institute, it's a well-known school. It's one of the oldest institutes in the country for art, design, fashion, film, photography, all the things I can't talk about, which is sort of paralleled to my own life because I did go to an art school. So it's like talking to myself 20 years ago. So how often do you get to be in a position where you get to minister to yourself? So I really do understand the mindsets of my students. In many ways, I have the same mindset. So it's a very beautiful thing. And when I first became the rabbi of the institute, and I think it's kind of maybe it's meant to be because I do feel institutionalized. So when I first became, this guy laughs at anything. It's great. Could you come to all my lectures?
I'll try.
It's great. He's great.
For the right price, you will do it.
For the right. Okay.
Price, yeah.
All right.
I need the money.
I'm his agent, so he's just signed.
All right. He needs the money. We go on the road together. It's perfect. Yeah, I'm in Chicago in 2. We'll talk. He's number 10. I know, but we're both number. We're like, it's like 00. It's not. He could be 00. Okay, 007. I don't want to talk about it. I actually worked on one of the Bond movies. Okay, so
we should make it 070.
There you go. Okay, so when I first became the rabbi of the institute, I tried all the traditional Chabad shtick. I still try, Moshe Vigda, don't get nervous. The Sabbath, kosher, holidays, and students would say to me, you're a great guy, you're funny, but this is art school. This is not art school. So I started to talk about the synthesis of theology and Yiddishkeit and popular culture. My background is in film. I have a degree in film history, and I wrote a book about, don't worry, it's not the topic, Moshe Vigda, it's not the topic. He's nervous now. I wrote a book about Jewish influences on superheroes and how the superheroes are like sort of archetypes, just like superheroes have double identities, one identity at home, another identity at work, and they create characters who themselves, and in fact their creators also had dualities. In fact, just to give you, he's gone. I can I can let loose, so I can be open. I give you one example, like the creator of Spider-Man. His name is Stan Lee, born Stanley Lieber. So here you have Jewish immigrants who have one identity, and they so really Stan Lee, born Stanley Lieber, Jack Kirby, born Jacob Kurtzberg, and so really this idea of a masked superhero is a little bit of a metaphor. It's very Purim, actually, very Purim related. We'll get to it, but it's very much a metaphor for Jewish immigrants who of the time also changed their names and wanted to fit in and blend in and perhaps play down their Judaism through fear of anti-Semitism. And these characters were almost like a representation of their creators. It's a kind of a fascinating. And I wrote this book. I didn't expect it to go anywhere, but it's Batman has been paying the bills for about a decade now because it's taken me all over the world, and it was a best-selling book. I didn't expect it to happen. I'm on CNN. It must be very slow news because I'm on CNN. I wrote a book about humor called Shtick Shift. I wrote a parenting book, and so Baruch Hashem, I feel like I've been able to sort of synthesize. I think the Rebbe always spoke about how Baal Tshuvas, come from different places and can find Yiddishkeit in those places. And there's incredible stories of people, whether it's through music and through art and through whatever discipline they grew up with, they can use, I guess, this vehicle as a way to bring Yiddishkeit. It may not be for Moshe Vigda to write a book on Batman, but for me it's something really that I grew up with, and it's very connected. So, however, talking about superheroes, I think in school, I discovered I had a superpower of my own. And that power was really the power of humor. And I'll be a little more serious now. That I remember I got bullied. I was I was like the smallest kid in high school, and I was promised a post bar mitzvah growth spurt that I'm still waiting for. And I was like sort of bullied mercilessly. And I discovered that I had this power of telling jokes. And I realized when you tell jokes, the cool kids start to like you much more, and the bullies start to bully you much less. And I think I'd subconsciously tapped into the Jewish tradition of telling jokes. We're going to get into Purim. It's coming. It's coming. Okay. So Time magazine once noted that 80% of the comedians in America were Jewish. I mean, it's fascinating. 2% of the population, 80% of the comedians. So there's something, I think, very specific about Judaism and humor, and it's seen throughout really Jewish history. And so I'd like to talk about the idea of humor and happiness, and we'll go from three perspectives. We'll talk about a cultural connection, a historical connection, and then to keep Moshe Victor happy, we'll get into a Torah and a biblical and a spiritual. I'm joking. And a spiritual connection to humor. What is the spiritual connection? And by the way, Purim is we know Purim is the happiest day of the year, but it's the difference between I think comedy and tragedy. It's a very fine line. It's like this. It's the joke we tell each other every holiday. They tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat. I mean, it's a joke, but it's only funny if it's true. And in fact, the Megillah is if you look at the story, it's not that funny at all. It's a story of genocide, that every single man, woman, and child is designated to be killed on a specific. There's nothing funny about that. It's I remember a few years ago I went to I was in Amazing Savings, and I got the kid. I have 4 kids, Baruch Hashem. I bought them coloring books, and they had in the middle it was Haman's kids all being hung from gallows in a brutal, bloody scenario of my kids. They're coloring, and this is it's a serious. I think it's a serious day. In fact, so we'll sort of build up the picture. So we'll start from a cultural perspective. So when you're a rabbi in Williamsburg, one of the most I'm on a lot of WhatsApp groups, and one of the most common discussions I see on WhatsApp is the price of Bitcoin. It's a very big topic. Every day I get told it's up, it's down, it's in, it's out. So it's interesting that the Jews have always sort of made jokes about humorous jokes about money, about affluence, and this really goes back to times of antiquity, when Jews, through complex laws of usury, very often were called the minority middlemen. The Jews had this sort of role, and there's always been very sort of anti-Semitic portrayals of Jews and money and affluence. And I had the chance a few years ago. I know Moshe Victor is a big fan of Shakespeare, but the Shakespeare and Dickens, there's a very, Shakespeare has The Merchant of Venice. There's the famous portrayal of Shylock, which is the Jewish moneylender, and it's a very negative portrayal. In fact, when the Royal Shakespeare Company opened their new place in Stratford-upon-Avon, they contacted me as a rabbi to write about my thoughts on Shakespeare's portrayal of Shylock. I was like very, the money was good too, but it was don't judge me. It was a big honor, and to really talk about things and readdress things. But if we look at American humorists from yesteryear, Jack Benny, familiar with Jack Benny? We're getting there, Moshe. Jack Benny has a whole career kind of based around the notion of the Jewish relationship with money. And in fact, Jack Benny, the most famous Jewish joke of Jack Benny, it's not even funny anymore. So, in fact, Jack Benny was once asked to throw out the opening ball of the World Series. And he took the ball, puts it in his pocket and sits down. It was like a funny thing that he did. In fact, the most famous Jewish joke of all, it's told many times that, the robber comes over to Jack Benny. He would say this on the radio, and people were platzing. The robber says, your money or your life? And after a painfully long pause, he repeats again, and Jack Benny says, I'm still thinking about it. It's like... It's the very it's really, he's laughing about this complicated relationship between, by the way, tzedakah, we all know, comes from the word tzedek, justice, that, giving tzedakah, in fact, Judaism does not look down on affluence and money. It's something that's sacred. It's something that's holy. In fact, it's not even a choice. It's really an obligation. It's a very righteous and holy and necessary thing to do. In fact, far from being cheapskates. In fact, the Jewish relationship with tzedakah is extremely, I think, exponentially, percentage-wise, very, very, very generous communities, and we really do sort of support and fund and finance. And it's something that I think culturally we've laughed about, because it's really that humor's a way to. They say that it's a coping mechanism. And if you have the last laugh, really you win even when you lose, which is why tragically, even in the most difficult of times, Jews have always told jokes. It's a way to have the last laugh. That's how we can cope with this very difficult Jewish journey throughout diaspora. Another approach, that's really a sort of a cultural approach, but a historical. We're getting to the spiritual, but a historical approach has been that Jews, I think, have always used humor as a way to stand up and really stand up to authority. If anyone saw the famous play Fiddler on the Roof, there's a line where they say, Hashem should bless the Tsar and keep him far away from us. So we see from this that I think that, Jews are wrestlers. We know Yisrael is one who wrestles with the divine. We know Jacob spends the night wrestling with an angel. That humor's a way that we're able to sort of wrestle. It's also a way to deal with perhaps uncomfortable topics. We know there's the famous story in the Talmud that it's growing over here. It's growing. The crowds are coming. So we know the very famous story of Rabbi who would begin the class with a joke, almost like not just a joke, like kind of like a right, which is a tradition that many rabbis will get up and they'll tell a joke. So it's explained that by telling a joke, you open people up to become a receptive vessel for wisdom, which is why the tradition of rabbis telling jokes, I think you'll find usually the most popular speakers, they're also the most entertaining and funny. And there was one time where I got up, I was the assistant rabbi in Brooklyn Heights, I cracked a joke, it went well, I told another, it went well. There was one week I forgot the Devar Torah. I said a joke, I said another one, and I forgot. And afterwards, by the kiddush, someone came over to me. They said, Rabbi, what was the third joke you told? I was like, you're missing the point. But I think that if we just tell jokes without taking the opportunity to impart some wisdom, then we're just sitting at a comedy club, and I don't think that's really the Jewish. That's not really the Jewish approach to humor and to laughter and to joy. So we'll talk about from a Jewish perspective. We know the first mention of humor in the Torah comes from Abraham and Sarah, who are told they're going to have children. Sarah is 90, Abraham Avinu is 100 years old. They're told you're about to become parents. The guy's 100 years old. He figures I've probably missed the boat already by now. He's 100. You're having a baby, and they laugh. They laugh, and we know that they name their child Yitzchak, Schoik, laughter. So we see the first mention of laughter in Torah is given. It's almost like a relief. It's like it's a reversal of fortunes.
It does Ruach HaKodesh though says, how come Sarah left and everything? Why did she already know that she was going to be? There's Ruach HaKodesh those days.
This guy's good. He's got good answers over here. We're going to wait. At the end, we'll do the Q&A, or as I say, the Jew&A. So we're going to get there. We're going to get there. And then if you look at Yitzchak's life, by the way, it's not such a funny life. I mean, like Yitzchak, then as he begins to grow, we see the Akedah. We see suddenly Yitzchak is faced with annihilation from his own father, and really the rabbis teach that's where humor comes from. It's Yitzchak really is the paradigm for humor and for laughter, because it's Yitzchak that comes in a position, he's so close to the end, and suddenly when you're so close to death and there's life, that's where the relief comes in. And that's really where the joy is. In fact, that's the joy of Purim. That we look at the Purim story and we say, wow, we were so close to annihilation, and we're still here, and we're still laughing, and we're still loving, and we're still together. It's exactly why Yitzchak is called Yitzchak. So really, if we see from this that there's nothing, it's really... I guess humor in Judaism is something, it's funny, but it's seriously funny. So I would say there's a very serious element, which is the idea of this reversal of fortune, which is really, I think that's why when it comes to Purim, and I took my kids today to get the Purim costumes. So they've got which is why, and by the way, I've been to many communities on Purim, and Williamsburg happens to be, it's wild. And it's very fascinating to see sort of Rosh Yeshivas and serious students. In fact, I'm from England, and England, they take it to a whole nother level, and the yeshivas will rent. It's very cool. They'll rent like big vehicles and floats, and they'll drive through the towns, and it's something incredible. For me, growing up secular, it was an incredible thing to see. Suddenly, this town, which is so serious and so black and white, suddenly is an explosion of color and laughter. It's something I never, as a kid, it was just mind-blowing to me. So I think what happens on Purim when we really, the idea of Purim, I think, is this reversal of fortune, which is why it's so funny, because we have a story that was so tragic and so frightening, and really it was really a story of genocide, and it suddenly becomes a story of laughter and a story of joy, and that's the relief of Purim, that's the relief of Yiddishkeit, and we celebrate this with costumes, because really, I believe on Purim, really Purim is the day that you take the costume off, but you take the costume off by putting the costume on. If that makes sense. You say that we know that Megillas Esther means to reveal that which is hidden. So we reveal.
Very nice.
It's getting. So we know Megillat Esther means to reveal which is hidden, and we do that by recognizing Hashem is hidden. Hashem is masked within the world, and to recognize the fact that Hashem masks Himself in the world, we wear a mask. So really, it's really a day that we're taking off the mask. It's the most joyous day because it's the most serious day. It's because it's serious. It's a relief. It's that relief. It's like every joke where he's about to go on banana skin, and suddenly it goes the other direction, and suddenly what looks so bleak, so dark, so desolate, such destitution is suddenly joy and laughter. And we see from this that everything is for a reason. We don't always understand the reason. I spoke in Crown Heights this weekend. They had a conference called C-Teens. They brought teenagers from all over the world came to Crown Heights, and I was on a panel of esteemed. I don't know how I got on the panel, to be honest, but I was on the panel with some very esteemed rabbis, and every time there was a question that was one of these really show-stopping questions, I would push it onto the rabbi next to me, and every time it was an easy one, I would field that question. And one of the questions was, and this was really, it's an incredible, talking about Purim and everything being for a reason, I can tell you an incredible thing that one of the students asked, why do, the question was basically, why do bad things happen to good people? It was worded slightly differently, but that was the question. And I said, I'm not a rebbe, I'm a rabbi, clearly. And, any rabbi that claims to tell you why bad things happen to good people is either a used car salesman or a cult leader, because I don't have the answers to these questions. I don't know. I have the same questions, and I don't know why we see sorrows in the world. I don't know why this terrible tragedy in Florida should have unfolded the way it did. And I spoke about the bravery of the students and the so inspirational to see such unity. And I don't want to be political, especially on global what's the word? On a global lecture, but it does seem clear to me that mental illness and automatic weapons is probably not the best cholent to have. So after the lecture, there was like a teacher comes over with a group of students, and they're all crying. And they said to me, you should know, Rabbi, we're from that school. And we had friends that passed away, and we're so grateful to be here. And your message really resonated. And we don't know why these bad things happen, but we can look back and really thank Hashem that we're still here. And perhaps Hashem is masked within the world. We don't know why this happens. And we don't know. We don't know. And, but I do know sometimes that Hashem is outside of time. And, by the way, the Rebbe says that laughter is it's just a healthier way to be. That the blood flows with greater ease when you're laughing and when you're happy. In fact, psychologists note that kids laugh over 200 times a day, whereas adults laugh about 17, my kids laugh about 2,000 times a day, but it is simply a healthier way to be. And I do like to tell people that laughter is one of the only weapons that you can take through airport security. So I think it's a very important weapon. It's a weapon the Jewish people have taken with us throughout history. I think we've dealt with the harshest situations with laughter, and perhaps sometimes with a serious approach to laughter and to joy. I know I told the story in the shul a few months ago that I was asked to speak at a campus retreat, and it was in California. I don't like to go to California the day of the talk because Shabbos and the traffic, it makes me, I get nervous. So, and I'm sitting at the airport, and I see the plane is delayed. Every rabbi has the plane story. I've got about 500 plane, but every Chabad rabbi has their own plane stories. They should make a book, Chabad Plane Stories. But so, cause everyone's got a plane story. That's why they watch the movie on the plane. I'm sorry. It's on a plane. Who was on a plane? It was on a plane. How many planes? So anyway, the plane is delayed. It's delayed again, and I was a little more nervous because I was the scholar in residence. And next to me was Mark Salem, who is a very well-known Orthodox mentalist. He was I'm not sure who was the entertainer and who was the toichem, but together we were both supposed to go to a retreat in the mountains outside of LA and entertain those hundreds of young professionals. And we get there, and it's now very late. And I'm driving in the car, and I can already see the sun, and I'm looking at the GPS, and I see this is not going to work. and I'm calling up the rabbis. They said it's going to work, and it's not going to work, and they call me back. It's not going to work. So I'm going on. I'm googling where Baruch Hashem Chabad is about as common in California as Coca-Cola. So I knew I was going to be close. So I look. I'm on the GPS. The nearest Chabad house is Rancho Cucamonga. I've never heard of it either. So I pull off the highway. I run to the door. The shliach doesn't know me. I don't know him. And suddenly the rabbi and the mentalist turn up. I said, we're your Shabbos guests. And he doesn't know me. I don't know him. It was an interesting situation. And it was really, I felt so terrible that, I thought I was going to be, entertaining all these students. And I had this whole plan of how things were going to go. And here I am. I'm suddenly stuck in Rancho Cucamonga. So it turns out that Shabbos, I think there were 8 people in the minyan. There was 10 with me and the mentalist. And as I'm by the kiddush, I'm schmoozing with this kid. And he says to me, you know what? I never normally go to shul on Shabbos. He said, but I was supposed to go to this retreat in the mountains because I really wanted to hear the speaker. This is what he's telling me. I really want to hear the speaker. And I couldn't make it, and I felt bad, so I came to shul. So I said, ironically, he was the only one that heard the speaker, and we ended up schmoozing the whole day, and we've become friends now. And ironically, he was at the shul. He was in Brooklyn with his father. He's been to my shul. I had a charity campaign. He donated, so he's a donor now. So it's like you never know. So I realized from this that. We don't always know the difference between tragedy and comedy. It's a very fine line, and it's all in the outcome and it's all in the ending. So I want to give everyone a blessing. We'll just end off with a couple more stories. But as we approach Purim, it's a serious day, and it's a day that we look back at all the. And we say, Baruch Hashem, we were so close, and we've been so close throughout history, and we're still here, and really, it's an absolute joy, it's an absolute miracle, it's an absolute bracha, it's an absolute blessing, and we really have to, I'm a very doting father, so I was, one time I was kissing one of my kids, and they did and I said, don't wipe it off. And my kid said, no, I'm rubbing it in. So sometimes all the sorrows, if you have the last laugh, you win even when you lose. And it really is, it's a very powerful coping mechanism. We know the story of Elijah the prophet, who was once walking through the marketplace, and Elijah is spotted, and somebody runs over, and they ask Elijah, who's going to heaven over here out of everyone here? And Elijah points to these 2 individuals. They run over. They figured, they must be great scholars, rabbis, investment bankers, doctors. What do you do? They say that we're bad chanim. When someone is sad, it's our job to cheer them up. It's our job to give them joy. So we see from this there is an incredible healing power of humor, and we see exactly what humor can do. Just to give you one very cute story, every Chabad rabbi has lots of stories. The crowds are pouring in now. Oh, unbelievable! I can start again if you want. Really, out of all the lectures I've ever given, this is the most recent. That was the opener. Right? And we moved into, then we told the Mark Twain joke. I could go through the whole thing. Grew up normal from Manchester. Superheroes. Okay, so every Chabad rabbi has many jobs. So one of my many jobs, in fact, I was fired. I wasn't fired, my wife said. I was laid off. I used to be the rabbi in Long Island College Hospital. Which is no longer in existence. They're now making a condo. Seems to be what happens in Brooklyn. You can't find gas anymore in Brooklyn. Everything, you turn around and there's another condo. Or banks. So one day I go to the hospital and suddenly it's a condo. I turn up, I'm ready to go, and there's no patients. It's a condo. So I don't know what happens if you're sick, but
I heard it was an urgent care place.
It's basically 95% condo,
and like a little like,
they put a Band-Aid on around the back. That's about it. That's it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the story goes that a number of years ago I was contacted by the local the Chabad of Brooklyn Heights, the Gan Israel. They wanted to come and give gifts to all the kids that were sick in pediatrics. It's a very nice thing to do. And at the time there was what was known as swine flu, this epidemic, and I was not allowed to bring any children due to the HIPAA laws. This is being filmed right now. I may get arrested, but we'll keep going. So I said I can't do it, but they said, please, Rabbi. I said, fine. You know, you'll bring a few kids, call me from reception. I go down in typical Chabad fashion. There's like 50, 60 kids, and they're all sitting there with boxes and ribbons. And I said, I can't do it. They said, Rabbi, look at the innocent glint in there. I said, hide behind me. So, you know, we go up to pediatrics. I'm like the Pied Piper. I've got the kids behind me. And the nurse says, you know, Rabbi, what are all these kids? I'm like, look, I'm a rabbi. Big families. So we're going in. So we go in. And she said, ironically, there's no one here today. There was a 15-year-old girl who didn't want to know. There was a baby in ICU, not particularly appropriate. And the only other kid was an 8-year-old kid sitting in the day room with acute autism. And suddenly this kid, who actually wasn't even Jewish, this kid is given like 50, 60 gifts from the Gan Israel summer camp. We almost killed him with kindness, literally, as the boxes were kind of... And his mother looks at me, she's like, she's thanking me, and the kid, it's really beautiful. He looked at me and he says, thank you. And the mother starts to bawl. She's crying, and I said, what's going on? She said, did you hear my son talk? I says, yeah. She says, that's the first time in his life that he's ever spoken a word. Wow. So I guess, you know, when we choose to be super, we just like the Megillus Esther, we reveal that which is hidden. When we look back at the totality of Jewish history, and we realize that we're still sticking around and we ain't going anywhere. And we're still doing what we're doing. We're going to continue to do what we're going to do. That's when we laugh, and that's when there's joy, and that's really when there is laughter. So, 5 minutes. Okay, I can do one more story. I'm trying to think which is appropriate, which is not. I'm censoring my mind. Firstly, I just want to say one thing, by the way. It doesn't get said often enough in Klal Yisrael. But I just would like to acknowledge the incredible dedication of Moshe Vigda, because he is an absolute, he's a gem. He's one of the hidden, and he gives his kishkas, his life and soul for this incredible Baal Shem Tov library. He's the first one to open up. He's the last one to leave, and he deserves a round of applause, everybody. I mean, he actually deserves a pay rise, but I don't think that's good. You know, I gotta work with what I can actually. You know, let's be realistic. But okay, so what I'd like to kind of end off with, it's one of my favorite stories. In fact, this story was so cool that when I wrote a book on parenting, I literally told the publisher to stop the presses. And I said, you got to put this story in. It's very cute. So the story goes that you know, I have my own Menachem Mendel now. It's kind of he goes to Pittsburgh Yeshiva, and everything he learns in the yeshiva, I'm most proud of. And this is one of the questions that the kids asked me at the C. They said at C-Teens, is it better to have a Jewish? Is it better to go to a Jewish school or not? They were asking me some very good questions. And I said, I don't know if a Jewish school is better, but I believe the Torah will make you better. So out of everything that my kid learns in yeshiva, it's really Friday afternoon when he goes out and meets people and puts on tefillin. I think he learns the most from giving to others. I think he learns the most from going out into the streets than he does from all his classes combined, but he is learning, and Baruch Hashem, he's a good boy. So a number of years ago, he comes to wake me up at a very ungodly hour, and I'm saying to him, Menachem Mendel, what's going on? This better be of monumental importance. And he says, yeah. I said, what is it? He said, well, Daddy, he said, my whole life you've bought me Playmobil. The toy Playmobil? He said to me, you bought me Playmobil, but I'd like you to buy me Lego. I'm like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. What are you talking about? And then I started to think about it. It was so profound, I don't think he was aware of the profundity, but what's the difference between Playmobil and Lego? So Playmobil, right, it's colorful, but there's nothing, the only work involved is opening the box. You open the box, it's a car, it's a plane, there's nothing to do, right? So Lego involves seichel. You have to think about it, visualize it, build it, and dream it. And I started to think like it's an incredible thing that it's almost, I'm Baal Tshuva, so I started to get very spiritual. I started to think it's like Mashiach's times, because you're building, right, that the weekday we're building to like Shabbos, to Mashiach, and it's the difference between kind of reaping and sowing and being and becoming, and it's a very powerful thing. So I start thinking about it. It's like he's building up to. So I realized that the difference between Playmobil and Lego is like the difference between playing and building. And I think that as we come to Purim, even though we think it's a day of playing, it's like it's a very happy day, but really it's a day of building. It's a day where we look back, there's relief and there's joy, and we begin to build. In fact, somebody mentioned something on Shabbos that caused me to almost fall off my chair. They said, Rabbi, they said, Pesach is coming. I almost fell off the chair because just the word Pesach and just the thought of what I have to do to my car. My kids put crackers in, it's crazy. I got to take the seat out. It's just, but however, when I'm sitting at that Seder table, after I've purged myself, and purged the car, and purged the apartment, there is something extremely joyous. So there's something very profound in the work and in the journey. And what I would like to say, even though that Purim, we're busy, we're going out and we're giving gifts, and it's a very much an action day. Just to end off with one more plain story from the Rolodex of rabbinical plain stories that I have. That I once gave a lecture at it was the Holocaust Museum in Naples, Florida, and I get to the airport and JetBlue tells me. They said, you've been, something happened, you've been upgraded. I said, great, I've been downgraded a lot in life, but I've never been upgraded. First time, they said, yeah, we're going to give you a seat with extra legroom. I said, great, because the one thing I need, I'm not even going to finish that, is extra legroom. So, and then she said to me, you have to know, she said something, I don't think she was aware of the Chiddush, but she said to me that, you're sitting by the emergency exit, and if the plane goes down, you got to help the other passengers off the plane. But you have to, I kind of channeled my Jack Benny, I said, I'm still thinking about it. She said, but you have to know, before you can put the oxygen masks onto other passengers, you have to oxygenate yourself. And I thought to myself, that's a very profound statement. And I think there's something to think about as we're going out in Purim and we're excited. But if we also have to remember when it comes to these most joyous of days. We know Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. We know it's really a day that we get to access everything, that we have to oxygenate ourselves, and we have to really internalize ourselves. So I would like to wish everyone Chag Sameach. I think I survived the Baal Shem Tov library, and if you have the last laugh, you do win, even sometimes when there is loss. So l'chaim, thank you so much.